Hello everyone, this is Margaret and I'm here at my garden which is called Moss House, and it's one of the gardens which is going to be open for Sydney Annual Garden Trail next year. And now you can see me talking about compost. So we are now in what I call my garden's kitchen, which is basically where I cook the food for my garden. Let's have a look. Alright, so I've got here Composting Bay, and unlike most of composting system you have seen, this one is built from something very different. It's actually the frames from IBC, from the bulk containers. You can see this frame is very sturdy, and you can buy them or even get them for free from companies which use the containers. If the frame is a little bit rusty or bent, cannot be used to move liquids in containers, so they have to do something with the frames. So the frame is on its side, and you can see the back, that's what was the bottom. We also cut out this opening here, so it's easier to put compost in and out. Now, when people talk about composting, they usually have problems with starting composting because they think it's very complex. You need to know a lot of stuff about it. And so what I can tell you is anything that used to be alive can be composted. So you don't have to really worry much about what to put in as long as it's made from natural materials and cut into pretty small bits, so they compost much easier. Now, going back, can be composted. I'm running hot composting system here. So what you can see in this particular bay, this is just cold compost, the things which sort of pile up randomly when we've got something ready to be put in compost. The other disclaimer is the things I don't compost through this open system is food scraps. Food scraps are composted in large worm farms. One of them is made from a bathtub. And we also have plenty of farms which are sitting on the ground in a garden. So now when we move to this particular garden, Compost Bay, this was full up to the brim about a week ago, because that's where I started my hot composting pile. And let me see how hot it is. You can see it's covered to protect it from changes of temperature. Oh, it's bubbling nicely. I'm just looking at the thermometer. Let me see what is the temperature here. It's upside down. Do you see the temperature? Sorry. Oh, I clicked on the wrong button, of course. But what I see on the thermometer is 57 degrees. Oh, I've got stuck on myself. Okay, now. So that's the thermometer, and you can see the red, which is now going down to 50, but it was about 57 degrees, so it's pretty hot. I'm going to turn this compost heap tomorrow after I remove my lipstick, take my hat off, and put some working clothes. Now, when it comes to building a hot compost heap, you have to have at least 1 cubic meter of things in volume, and you assemble the whole heap in one go. So you don't just throw things like every day a little bit more. You need to collect materials to build the compost heap. And what I've got here, it's materials prepared to build another one. So I'm lucky because I've got animals in my garden. So I've got access to animal manures. And you could see the beautiful red trays here. That's my rabbits' litter trays. Rabbits are very clean. They use litter trays, and you can see a lot of beautiful bunny pellets here. They probably went to the bottom. And the whole tray is filled with newspaper and straw. So it's very good material to be composted. When it comes to proportions of things you put in your hot compost, and you say which I'm going to use to start compost, and then I'm going to move the cooked compost to another one. When we compost, we think very often too much about proportions of things which we can put into compost. And I can give you advice don't get hooked on that. Just make sure that you know what are the hot materials and what are the cold materials. So in composting, you try to use by volume, not by weight, by volume. About 1 part of high nitrogen or hot or green materials, and about 4 parts by volume of dry materials or high carbon. So usually it's pretty easy to say what stuff is dry. So people think, wood chips, straw, paper. There are some exceptions. For example, hays which are made from legumes like pea straw or lucerne straw, they will have more nitrogen. And another material which people think it's classified as high carbon, it's coffee grounds, which I've got from a local coffee shop, spent coffee grounds. They are also high in nitrogen. But otherwise, fallen leaves, straw, wood chips, this sort of stuff, dried leaves from the garden, this is all classified as high carbon. And a lot of people have difficulties with finding enough high carbon materials because they put a lot of food scraps into compost, which is high nitrogen. So high nitrogen, that would be animal manures, including human hair, any greenery. So I've got here cut comfrey and nettle leaves, which are really good high nitrogen compost activators. So I'm going to use them for building my compost heap. And when you build hot compost heap, you don't need to layer things in particular order. Just make sure that you mix them well. So if you start with a little bit of straw or high carbon material, then alternate it with high nitrogen and so on. Remember wetting your compost heap as well, because when you wet it, this is when you feed the bacteria. The bacteria actually need some moisture to develop. And the temperature in compost heap will raise on its own. So it's not like I use any heat source to compost. It's the same way we eat food and our liver starts heating up and exuding the heat, and then we feel warm. The same is happening with the bacteria. They actually produce heat, and this is why the compost heap is getting hotter. With hot composting system, you can actually put a lot of things which you would not put in normal compost, like for example certain bulbs and weeds, even seedy things, because if you turn this compost often enough and let it cook, heat up several times, that will destroy a lot of pathogens and a lot of bulbs and grains which you could find otherwise. So let's have a look at the things I've got here prepared for my composting. Alright, so I've got seaweed, which I collected from a local beach. In New South Wales you can collect up to about 20 liters of seaweed from beaches which are not part of marine reserves. And it has to be floating seaweed, so you are not allowed to cut it off from rocks or pull it from the rocks. It has to be floating. So the best time to go foraging for seaweed, it's to go to the beach after high tide. And I put some of the seaweed I collected previously in water, and I'm cooking. It's going to be it started to smell already. It's basically fermenting the seaweed and also some comfrey into very concentrated fertilizer, which is very much like sea salt. So seaweed, like anything that's still alive, like alive plants, greenery, this is high nitrogen part of your compost operations. I was talking about animal manures and animal bedding. So in case of my rabbits, there's a lot of animal urine which has been gone into the newspaper underneath. You probably can't see it, but yeah, it's definitely wet at the bottom. So that's what I'm going to add. Another thing is, I don't know if you can hear my chickens. I can hear them, but I also pick chicken manure which has soaked chicken bedding, and for chicken bedding I use what is called coffee chaff or coffee husks. We talked about in several gardens, you could hear people talking about the source of Hessian sacks, which is coffee roasting businesses, but they also beg you to take a byproduct of cleaning fresh coffee beans, which is the husks, coffee chaff, and that's how I receive them from local coffee roasters. You can see it's very lightweight. It's like tissue paper. It's very good bedding for chickens because it soaks up all the moisture, so it's really good absorbent. It's not so good to put on a garden because some people are tempted to use it instead of mulches you buy. You can get free coffee chaff, because if they get wet, they create cardboard like a layer, and then any rain couldn't penetrate into the soil. But if you do composting at home, it does not have to be hot composting, but say in an apartment or somewhere and you've got too much wet stuff, you can add paper, or you can add coffee chaff as high nitrogen material. So it's a very, very good thing to have in your garden, especially if you are composting a lot of animal manures or a lot of food scraps, a lot of green materials. Another material which very often people don't think about composting is freshly cut grass. So you do any lawn mowing, then you're not going to compost it on its own, and you need a high volume of something that's high carbon. So why don't you go and get some free coffee chaff from coffee roasters before your next lawn mowing time, and you can mix them, add some animal manures, and off you go. You build a great compost heap. And I've shown you already coffee grounds, again for free from coffee shops. And to cover my compost, I use hessian sacks. I also use them to cover my worm farms. So a good resource. Well, it's not my resource center, but definitely my resource center for building a compost heap. And I'm going to do this today after. If you have any questions, that recording will be sitting on Facebook, and I can always answer any questions you have if you are not watching this live. So thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you again when you come to my garden. Thanks a lot.